It's the 20th day of July 2022. Good evening to you wherever you are, and welcome to today's edition of Wednesday Palaver. My name is Ivan Bant. We're streaming live across 46 African countries and other parts of Europe via our satellite. We're live on Facebook as well at Pan African Television, on YouTube at Pan African Television. Well, today's topic tabled for our conversation is socialism, a tool for solving the economic challenges in Africa. Socialism, a tool for solving the economic challenges in Africa. Well, when I shared this very artwork that talked about this very topic on my social media platform, one of the questions that I got was, how does socialism, I beg your pardon, solve the unemployment challenges in Africa? And a couple of other, questions that were asked. Well, today, our guest is already seated. We'll be looking at this very conversation extensively and look at how best socialism can play its role as far as the developmental, platform Africa is concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been joined in the studio by the Secretary General of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, who is in the person of Kwesi Pratt, or Comrade Kwesi Pratt Jr. He's joined us here. Ladies and gentlemen, with a sound round of applause, help me invite Kwesi Pratt in to have this conversation. So, Comrade, let's have you. First of all, for the purposes of people watching us, let's start with socialism. What socialism means and how socialism can come in to solve the economic challenges in Africa.
Well, I would not take that approach.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I would not take that approach because we cannot be talking about solutions when we don't know the problem.
Right.
So I think that it's important to start with what the problem is. What simply is the problem? And if you look at the problem, it's not just confined to Africa, but it's confined to many, many countries around the world, in Latin America, in Europe, everywhere. Everybody is suffering from the same malice. I mean, about 3 weeks ago, some research indicated that about 1 million children in the UK are unable to find food. I mean, they are on the brink of starvation. That is the United Kingdom. The story is the same on all the continents. But if we zero in on the Ghanaian situation, the problem simply is that over the last 2 years, food prices have gone up by 400%. The problem is that petroleum prices have gone up in excess of 100%. The problem is that we are sending our children to school and they cannot be fed because there is no food. You understand? The problem is we are spending 128% of total national revenue on public sector emoluments and debt servicing, 128%. Which simply means that if we get a visiting head of state and we have to give him a bottle of water, we cannot do that if we don't borrow. You understand? The problem is that rents are shooting up through the skies and newly employed people cannot afford housing. The problem is that our roads are very, very bad. They're in deplorable conditions. Part of the problem is that when it rains, people's houses get flooded, people suffer, and so on. Part of the problem is this. Yesterday, a classmate of mine fell ill and was rushed to hospital on Saturday. Monday morning, he's still in the hospital, he's still on admission. Monday morning, he's presented with a bill of 70,000 Ghana cedis. That's the problem. Access to healthcare. That's the problem. You understand? So all of us know the problem. You don't have to go to the university to know the problem. Everybody knows when he can't feed himself. Everybody knows when transport fares go up. Everybody knows when your children come back from school and you can see that they are malnourished and so on. These are the problems which confront us. Now, I think that the next issue has to do with why do we have these problems? Why do we have these problems? And it's a long story, you understand. Why do we have these problems? We have these problems partly because at a certain point in our development, the best of our people, the best, the very best, the strongest, the macho, the architects, the engineers in our society, the medical practitioners in our society, and so on, were captured as beasts of burden and taken out of the continent, taken out of Ghana to slave for the prosperity of others. Okay? Now, if you go to any society and you take all the engineers or most of the engineers, you take most of the doctors, you take most of the educated and so on, and ship them out of that society, it takes a long time for that society to recover. Just from the loss of skills, loss of knowledge, all of that, the trauma and so on, takes a long time. And our societies have not recovered fully from the effects of the transatlantic slave trade. So that's part of the problem. Now, the other part of the problem is that we were colonized. And what did colonialism mean for our people? What colonialism means for our people simply is that, one, we lost our right to elect our own leaders. The Queen of England sat in London and appointed the head of state. We lost that right, okay? At a certain point in our history, even district and municipal chief executives were appointed by the Queen of England. We lost that right to elect our own people, okay? So we wanted to regain that right in that national liberation struggle which was waged across Africa, in Asia, and elsewhere, you understand? Then, secondly, we did not own our resources, and we did not control our resources. And I like to look at the map of Ghana to tell the story. I mean, I look at the map of Ghana every day, and every time, anytime I see the map of Ghana, the story is told. If you look at the map of Ghana, all the railways, all the railway lines start from centers of the production of wealth. The gold mines, the diamond mines, the bauxite mines, the timber, areas where we fell timber and so on. Those are the areas where the railway lines start. Where do the railway lines end? They don't end up in factories, which add value to what we produce. They end up at the harbor. All of them were built to end up at the Takoradi harbor. So that infrastructure was built to take resources out of this land. You know, it was not built to promote engineering. It was not built to promote, you know, harmonious relations between the North and the South and so on. Just built to take timber, to take bauxite, to take aluminum, to take all that we have out of this country. Now, there's a very important dimension to all of this, which is simply that all of these resources we are talking about, gold, diamond, manganese, bauxite, oil, gas, they are not renewable resources. They are not renewable, okay? So once you dig them and take them out of the soil and you deposit them in Europe, they're gone forever. You're not going to be able to replant gold or replant diamond and so on. They're gone forever, okay? So I ask myself a very basic question. Today, with all of these resources embedded in our soils, look at the extreme poverty that our people suffer, look at the hardship, look at the general state of deprivation and so on. So I like to sit back and imagine 50, 60 years from now, when all of these resources have been taken out, what will be the plight of my grandchild? What will be the plight of our grandchildren and so on? That's an important question that we need to answer, okay? So the ownership of our resources and who benefits from the exploitation of these resources is also an important question, okay? Then I think there's another dimension. There's another dimension. What are the solutions which are on offer today? And you have all these apostles of liberal democracy pouring in from North America, from Britain, and so on. They come and they say, look, if you want to develop, you have to follow our example. That is what is on offer. If you go to university in Ghana, they tell you to develop, you have to follow the American model. To develop, you have to follow the German model, and so on. That is what is on offer. But I think we need to stop and think and to ask a few questions. How did these countries develop? They developed partly, not wholly, but partly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. They developed partly as a result of the exploitative arrangement that they instituted through colonialism. And they continue to develop because the world order promotes neocolonialism. The world order promotes neoliberalism. The world order doesn't challenge their hold on us. That's how they develop. So if you're going to follow the example, and I ask this question all the time, which people in what part of the world are we going to capture as slaves to work for us for 100 years without pay? Is it possible today in the modern world, in July 2022, are there some people somewhere that we can also go and capture as beasts of burden to work our plantations for free and so on, to produce wealth for our development? I don't know of any country that we can go and colonize its people, to enslave its people. So that option is out of the question. You cannot follow the American model because this option is not available to us. Then there's the colonial option. And what happened? 1884, our history tells us how the imperial powers met around the table. They put the map of Africa on the table, and they drew lines across Africa, and those became states, and their spheres of influence and so on. So today we want to follow the German model. We want to follow the French model and so on. Can anybody tell me which countries we can also colonize? Well, I've been told that perhaps we can try Togo. And when I was told that we can try Togo, I was so shocked. Because that possibility does not exist. Of course, Togo is a small country, but it is not ready to be colonized. To colonize Togo, we have to defeat them militarily. Now, if you look at the Ghana Air Force, we are still using MiG 16. The Italian aircraft MiG 16. 16. You understand? That's what we are using. That aircraft will struggle to kill a fly. That aircraft will really struggle to kill a fly. The Togolese Air Force is using French-made Jaguars. So that option is also not available to us. You can't colonize Togo. Okay? So if you dismiss all of these options, then what option is realistic? The only option which is realistic is to follow the dreams of Modibo Keita, to follow the dreams of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, to follow the dreams of Chris Hani, you understand? To follow the dreams of Sekoturi, and own our own resources. Let our own resources belong to us. And let us exploit these resources for the benefit of our people. Let us exploit these resources not just to fatten the pockets of so-called investors in the colonial metropolis, but let us exploit these resources so we can fight poverty, so we can fight ignorance, you understand? So we can open up access to social services, health, education, and so on. This is the only option available to us. Now, if this is the only option available to us, and we want to put a label on it, sometimes I like to have these discussions without putting the labels. Because if you put the labels, some people tend to get confused and so on. Let's discuss practically what is it, what the problem is, and how we can resolve that problem. But for those who love labels, if you have to put a label on this, the answer is socialism. And why is the answer socialism? The answer is socialism because the key principle in socialism is that we need to build a society in which everybody, regardless of their ability, can survive as human beings. Everybody, regardless of their ability. And that's an important principle because some people are born with malfunctioning faculties. They can't function the way others function. Are we saying that those people who are born with malfunctioning faculties they should be sentenced to death? They shouldn't. They should also eat, they should drink potable water, and to the extent that is possible, we should help them to acquire skills and so on. So you need to build a society in which your own ability does not determine your survival. Your own ability does not determine whether you can have a fruitful life or not. You build a society in which all of us contribute to bringing prosperity to everybody. And I believe that that system is socialism. Okay? We need to build a society in which those who produce the wealth are in a position to decide what that wealth should be used for. The distribution of the wealth ought to be decided by those who produce the wealth and not the parasites who steal what the workers produce. That society, as far as I'm concerned, is a socialist society. You understand? And we can discuss all the other attributes of socialism and so on. But fundamentally, we are confronted with a crisis of underdevelopment. We are confronted with a crisis of poverty. We are confronted with a crisis of ignorance. We are confronted with a crisis of bad leadership. We are confronted with a crisis of distortion. I mean, our history is being distorted beyond imagination and so on. And we need to address all of these things. And addressing all of these things, the framework, the framework within which we think and act ought to be socialism. I hope I've tried to answer.
Of course. So I think at this point we'll try as much as possible to take contributions and the questions from studio audience. So if we can have the microphone, let's. R. Kelly, you're 1, Mr. Sawyer 2, Comrade 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I'll start with R. Kelly. What's your question, please?
Mine is a contribution. Thank you very much for granting me this opportunity. Fast forward us. Yes, after what Comrade Principal said, what I think is the answer is socialism. Yes, because this is why I started with socialism. It's a social. It's saying if your brother doesn't have a phone, likewise give to him or her. So fast forward, the order of the day is to make sure everybody is satisfied and nobody goes home hungry. The white people come here, they build our factories and the rest of the factories. They take all the properties outside. So our leaders need to move from greediness and make sure that everybody is happy. Yes, I'm a journalist and a reporter. I've reported so many things. When you go to Pamparia, last time I was there and it's flooded. When you look at the community, it was very, very bad. And I'm interacting with some of the community, the people there. There's nothing good to write about this country. So we can do much more better than that when we join hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sawyer.
Comrade, thank you so much. Thank you for your eloquent explanation to everything you said. We are so grateful. There are food security in this country. I wouldn't want to say only Ghana and even Africa and then even the world. What is the way forward in terms of socialism? How do we go about it?
Comrade said, the white man is taking resource out. What about indigenous Ghanaians with money, not investing in our economy to build our economy, investing outside, going in and developing outside economies, not here. There's also that. And also, like J.J. Rousseau, one of the great thinkers of the French Revolution, Montesquieu, J.J. Rousseau, D'Alembert, Diderot. J.J. Rousseau said, and I quote, all men are born free and equal, yet everywhere they are in chains. The best way to break those chains is socialism. Number 2, last one, Hitler, Adolf Hitler, righteous Führer, the Führer Hitler, of Germany, Führer of Germany. Mein Kampf. I'll translate Mein Kampf. I can put it in English for you. Mein Kampf. He wanted to use our skin, black skin and brown skin, for shoes, bags. I mean, and the neo-Nazi party still exists. We have to wake up, like I said last week on this same group. We have to wake up, and it has to come from us. Thank you.
What? Can we deal with the three questions?
So let's deal with the three questions, right? So once we are done, we'll look at the other questions.
Move on, so I don't get confused. My brain is only...
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'd like to start with the Jesus thing. Okay. And the Jesus thing has many dimensions, and I think it's important to recognize all of the dimensions. For example, we know that in Latin America, something emerged in Latin America called liberation theology, which used theology to fight for the liberation of people from poverty, from oppression, from exploitation, and so on. The same Jesus Christ. Okay? We know also that elsewhere, we are told that what happens on this world doesn't matter, that we have to build our treasures in heaven, and that the kingdom of God, is not open to people who are affluent, and so on. We are told that. That's also the same Jesus Christ, okay? There is some guy who, in the 1970s, lived in Jowulu, in Accra, who was called the Jesus Christ of Jowulu, who claimed to be the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. And he taught his followers that if you want to go to heaven, you don't have to take your bath. You don't have to wear shoes, and so on. You don't have to live in a house, and so on. That's another Jesus Christ. And then there is Jim Jones. You all heard about Jim Jones, who encourages people to drink poison as a way of getting to heaven. That's another Jesus Christ. Recently, about 4 weeks ago, somebody also emerged in Nigeria who was taking monies from businessmen to show them the gate to heaven so they can enter heaven, through Nigeria and so on. That's another Jesus Christ. Now, so when I hear people talking about Jesus Christ and his life and so on, I begin to wonder which of the Jesus Christs we're talking about. But there are so many of them, so many interpretations of the scripture and so on. So which is the Jesus Christ that we're talking about? The Bible teaches us that the original Jesus Christ hated exploitation. And the Bible actually tells us that Jesus Christ was not dumb, okay? And that Jesus Christ could get very angry. And he got angry at exploiters and liars, to the extent that he actually picked up a cane and walked into his father's house and gave those who were misusing his father's name a good whipping. You understand? That's the Bible. I mean, that's the Bible, okay? So I have no difficulty with people being Christian or Muslims and whatever. That's what they believe in. I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, I come from a long line of priests and so on. And if you hear my name, you know that. You understand? So I'm not going to get into the boxing ring with Christianity. And I'm also not going to invite Christianity into my sitting room. Okay? But I think it's important for all of us to examine the relevance of things. Christ, everybody, Buddha, and so on. Examine their relevance in our lives. And if you do the examination, everybody can come to a fair conclusion. One of the things that I've been unable to live with is simply this. We all go to church. When the priest is in trouble, the congregation is asked to make contributions to pay for the needs of the priest. When people in the congregation are in trouble, they are told to pray. That's a huge problem, isn't it? That's a huge problem. I mean, you go to church, you know what happens in the church. You go to the church, you are paying collection, you are paying tithes and so on. It's not enough for these priests. You need to bring anointing oil for the priest to do something for you, for the Spirit of God to protect you. The kiosk outside selling the anointing oil is owned by the priest's wife. You know, and we are told to keep our treasures in heaven and so on. I definitely have no intention of keeping my treasures in heaven. I want my treasures here. You understand? After all, Jesus, when he lived on this earth, if the story is true, ate. If he didn't eat, he couldn't have performed the miracles he's supposed to have performed. He couldn't have led the crusade he's supposed to have led and so on. So eating is important for everybody. You understand? So I want to find out whether what I believe in or I don't believe in, how it contributes to solving my problem of hunger. So, and everybody can do that. I'm not going to give the prescription. You know, we have suffered a lot because of the labels which have been put on us. You start pointing to a new part of development which works. Instead of our opponents arguing with us on whether or not what we are putting forward works or not, they simply tag you and say, oh, he's Antichrist. And innocent but ignorant people are pushed into a position against us. I think we ought to be smarter than that. And we ought to discuss people's concern on the basis of what works and leave out all the other things. I don't care whether you're a Christian or Muslim. What I care about is whether you're on the side of the exploiter or you're on the side of the exploited. That's the most important thing. And it is possible for Christians to be on the side of those who resist exploitation. And it is possible also for Christians to be on the side of those who do the exploitation. I'm sure that many of you have visited our castles, especially the Cape Coast Castle and the Elmina Castle. And there you see in vivid relief the role that some of the churches played in our enslavement. On top of the slave dungeons sat a church and a priest who blessed the cargo of slaves so that they could arrive safely in North America to work the plantations for free. That kind of priest is not somebody who can pray for me. That kind of priest is an enemy. That kind of priest is on the side of exploitation. And I would have nothing to do with those who fight on the side of exploitation. And we know that. And we know about the paper bull of 1452. I'm sure you know about the paper bull of 1452, where the head of the Catholic Church actually signed a law authorizing King Alfonso of Portugal to go into the world and convert people to Christianity. And the paper bull said that those who refuse to be converted to Christianity should be killed. Their wives should be seized and their properties should be seized and so on. Is that the work of God? We can all decide. Is that the work of Jesus Christ? We can all decide. I'm not going to make the decisions for you. The paper bull, I think, to speak in terms of evil and good and so on, the paper bull obviously was evil. You know, and I have nothing to do with the paper bull and so on. Then you raise the issue about the crisis that we are all going through. You know, the hunger, the poverty, and so on. Only recently, something has become a major topic for discussion. It's about the International Monetary Fund and whether we should go to the International Monetary Fund or we should not go to the International Monetary Fund. You know, Albert Einstein said something which is very interesting. He said that those who do the same things repeatedly and expect different results are wacky. I lie? I'm not the one saying it. Albert Einstein said it. that if you keep doing the same things over and over again, and you expect to get a different result, somebody needs to examine your head. You understand? Now look at Ghana. Since 1965, we have gone to the IMF 19 times. 19 times. So, is Albert Einstein listening, watching us? 19 times. We keep going. We went the first time, we went the second time, 19 times. And every time we go to the IMF, our condition becomes worse. Maybe somebody needs to examine the heads of our leaders. Because it's not working. You understand? It's not working. And it's not working for good reason. 1982-83, under Mr. Rawlings, we went to the IMF. What did they tell us? They said, look, we want to get you out of your difficulties and so on. But first of all, reduce the size of workers in the public service and the civil service. In 12 months, 300,000 workers lost their jobs. Then they told us to privatize state enterprises. In 3 to 4 years, we sold more than 300 factories which were built by the Nkrumah government. And we're told that they are better in private hands. Okay? Today, look around. All the factories that we sold, the shoe factory, the State Fishing Corporation, the Black Star Line, the Ghana Airways, and so on. Over 300 of those, we sold them. How many of those factories survived in private hands? I can think of only 2. The only 2 surviving enterprises which were privatized are Movenpick Ambassador Hotel and Golden Tulip Hotel. I mean, the whole argument that things happen better in private hands has collapsed. When we follow the IMF, one of the things that we should have discovered is that it's not true that private capital does things better. You understand? Ghana Airways has collapsed. Black Star Line has collapsed. State Fishing Corporation has collapsed. The glass factory has collapsed. The tile factory has collapsed. Everything we privatized has collapsed except 2. Golden Tulip Hotel and Movenpick Ambassador Hotel. That's an important lesson, for us. Then they told us that, look, your currency is too strong. Your currency is too strong, so we should devalue the currency. Between 1982 and now, we have devalued the Ghanaian currency by 38,000%. Can you wrap your head around it? 38,000%. Now, what has that done to us? You understand? What has that done to us? Look at the debt burden and so on. You understand? So, for me, it is clear that these hardships exist, but the prescriptions we are getting don't work. By 1976, the Achampon government had come to the conclusion that the way forward for our agriculture was not the application of chemical fertilizer for all the reasons. It was not good for our health. We were not making it here. We had to import it and so on. You know all the reasons. So the Achampon government established the Teshinungwa compost plant, 1975-76. Okay? Today, how many years later, we are still blaming Russia-Ukrainian war for our problems because we cannot get fertilizer cheaply to buy. What is wrong with our leaders? And what is wrong with us for allowing them to stay in power? Yes, our leaders may not be thinking, but we who allowed our leaders to stay in power and to wreak havoc in our lives are equally guilty. You understand? So, yes, the hardships are there, but we need to find ways of addressing the hardship. And in addressing the hardship, there are a few things that we have to learn. General Kutu Achampon became head of state through a coup d'etat in 1972. He was a graduate of the Swedro Business College. He didn't even have the opportunity to go to the University of Ghana. He didn't go to Harvard. He didn't go to Oxford. He didn't go to Lincoln. And yet, this graduate of Swedro Business School, a second cycle institution, recognized that the way forward for agriculture was not chemical fertilizer, but organic fertilizer. This graduate from Swedro Business School came to the conclusion that Ghanaians needed to control the commanding heights of their economy, and actually passed a law making it compulsory for Ghanaians to own 55% shares, interest in all mining activities. So we should not be deceived by the Lincolns and the Harvards and the Oxfords and so on. I mean, the problem is not that complicated. You understand? This is Ghana, okay? Our land is crisscrossed by all kinds of rivers, and you know them. Volta, we have two, white and black, and so on. Oti or Fin, and so on. In Ghana and Nkrumah, we managed to create the largest man-made lake in the world. We are bordered on the south by the Atlantic Ocean, and we are importing fish. Somebody should tell me one good reason why Ghana is importing fish. You understand? So sometimes we can be very practical about our problems and how to resolve our problems. I mean, if you talk to all these heavyweight economists and so on, and you ask them, how is the economy doing? Say, oh, last year the per capita income grew by 5%. And we're expecting that next year the GDP will grow by so much and so much. It's all nonsense. And you know why it's nonsense? It is absolutely nonsensical because these are statistical averages which doesn't tell us anything. When they say that the per capita income grew, it may well be possible that 5% of the population had their incomes grow so huge that it pushed the per capita income up. And 95% of the population had a huge drop in their incomes, and they are suffering hunger, they are suffering disease, they are suffering illiteracy, and so on. So just throwing per capita income at you does not address the fundamental problems. Now, when it comes to inflation, like all statistical figures, output is dependent on input. Output is always dependent on input. And recently there's been a battle between some professor from the United States of America and our statistical service. This professor from the United States of America calculates inflation at 49-point-something%. Our statistical service says that they are calculating it at 27%. All of them went to economic school. So who is right? And then when you ask questions, they say, oh, it depends on what is in the basket for calculating inflation. Basket? What basket? You understand? So I think it's important for us to constantly educate ourselves, and by educating ourselves, I do not mean that we should all become PhDs and so on. Just exercising our minds to understand our problems and to find solutions to the common problems that we have and so on is education. Education is not sitting in the classroom. I mean, my friend and our comrade, Dr. Percy, who himself has a PhD, on one radio program actually said something which I thought was very profound. He said that until he went to the university, he didn't know that there were stupid professors. That's a profound statement from one of them. You understand? So let's try and think outside the box and so on. I think that we can get very far, you know.
Right, thank you very much. So let's have you, comrade. And right after that, we'll have you as well.
Thank you very much. I think the world has a lot to offer for everybody. But even in America, people are homeless, hunger, and jobless. And Africa and Ghana, people are crying. And I think capitalism is very high for our continent. Africa is too young for capitalism, so is Ghana. And what is also there is that, Comrade Kwesi, I don't know. I think Ghana is over abusing the IMF facility. And the IMF too have opened their doors as a bait to the Ghanaian leaders or the African leaders. When they go for the money, they waste it through corruption, through anything, because they know the IMF is still there, they'll go again. Is there a way that the IMF can give a ceiling? If you have been there for 20 times, you can't come again. So that people can stand on their toes. The little that they take, they will know how to turn it around. Thank you.
My point is that for a long time, but in Great Britain, so-called great thinkers have talked about Africans, or this, what I would say, Herbert Spencer. Some of them spoke about survival of the fittest. They feel the strong should always control, so that there will be no way the marginalized will come forward. But when you look at African situation, I believe that the philosophy of maybe Walter Chon, from each according to his ability and to each according to his needs, should be practicalized in Africa. And then that's the only way, because we are having so many challenges. The capitalists won't allow us to rest, because, like what I said, social Darwinism, they are ready to take up all our resources. So the only way we can do is to get together, control our resources. You work, you get from what you work. Your needs are taken care of, and the rest are divided, and will be okay. And that is the only way. And socialism is the only way that we can use to achieve that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my question is, yesterday I was watching a documentary, and the documentary that I was watching was telling us that there are so much food in this world. The number of food that are in this world are more than the people who are in this world. So I asked myself, so how come some people go hungry, they don't eat? Because if you check countries, in fact, it's very sad. So I just want to know, politicians have already destroyed this country. They have destroyed this country. They have taught us that the only way we can also survive is through capitalism. You get your own, you don't share it with anybody. So I just want to ask, what can socialism or socialists do to help the society? Because the society is in fact, they have already destroyed our mind that you need to get your own by yourself. So what can socialists do to help we the youth of this country? Because as we are talking, majority of these youth don't know socialists. So as we are socialists here, what can we do to also help our people over there and the governing, the politician who always govern us? So what can socialists do to help them? Thank you.
I think I've explained the problem, and I need not say much. Okay. Now you say there's enough food around the world to feed everybody, and yet there's hunger in the world. What is the reason? The reason simply is that under capitalism, production is to create profit. Where production does not bring profit, under capitalism, you don't produce food because you want to feed people. You produce food because you want to make profit. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So there's a lot of food, but for the capitalist to make his profit, it must be bought at a certain price and under certain conditions. If those conditions cannot be met by populations and so on, the populations die of starvation. And that's a very good case for socialism, because under socialism, we do not produce, or you do not produce for profit. You produce for the satisfaction of human need. Okay? So profit is not part of the equation when it comes to production. So, to some extent, you've answered the question yourself. Look, under capitalism, why do people become doctors? People become doctors not because they are passionate about healing the sick. They become doctors because if you become a doctor, you become a big man. You drive a big car. You live in a comfortable house and so on. Being a doctor is not about solving the health problems of society. It's also about profit. Healthcare must generate profit. If it doesn't generate profit, let the people die. And we saw it in 1982, 1983 and so on, when we were urged to withdraw subsidies on social services. So we withdrew subsidies on health and came up with a policy which was then called cash and carry. Now, cash and carry in practice, what was it? If you got an accident and they rushed you to any emergency room in a hospital, if you couldn't pay, you die. We saw it here. You understand? Now, you take a country like Cuba. Take a country like Cuba. And Cuba has developed one of the best systems for healthcare in the world. Recently, during the COVID crisis, Cuba, a small island country of 11 million people, had to send medical aid to Italy, to many countries around the world. How did they do it? Because Cuba builds a medical system based on the needs of its people. The philosophy is that people will fall sick, and when people fall sick, they need to be cured. That the state has a responsibility to make sure that people don't even fall sick, preventive medicine and so on. So Cuba trains thousands of doctors, not just for themselves, but for all other countries which are willing to cooperate with them to solve the health problem, not to make profit. You understand? And you see the Cuban doctors who come here. Their lifestyle, the way they are and so on, is not different from the lifestyles of drivers, of market women and so on. They sleep in simple houses, they go to the rural communities, they're ready to work and so on. That is socialism in practice. You understand? So, yes, for as long as we produce for profit, we will have food which will not be available to certain sections of our population and so on. Now, my brother, very interesting. You said that we should find a way, or the IMF should find a way of stopping our leaders from coming to them. Now, if the IMF managed to stop our leaders from coming to them, what would be its relevance? What would be the need for it to exist? The IMF exists simply because our leaders go to them and ask for solutions. Okay? One thing we need to understand very clearly is that the IMF was not set up to build roads in the third world. The IMF was not set up to feed people in the third world and so on. The IMF was set up to give what they call policy credibility. You've heard our leaders always talk about policy credibility. When President Mahama led the team to go to IMF, he said they were going for policy credibility. Recently, we've also heard about policy credibility. What is policy credibility? Policy credibility is simply this. You go to the IMF, they tell you a number of measures to institute, and they supervise you implement those measures. So that you can make savings to pay your loans. Now, you pay your loans to who? You pay your loans to Western financial institutions. So their prime objective is to keep the Western financial system oiled and working. I hope you understand. Now, if we owed all our debts to China, what the heck? IMF is not interested in helping you to repay your loans to China. Today, if all our debts were owed to Russia, the IMF is not interested in giving you a bailout to go and pay your loans to Russia. Because its primary objective is to keep the Western financial system working. Okay? Now, I get a bit surprised when I hear many prominent Ghanaians, I'm sure you've all heard them, members of parliament and so on, say, oh, it is good to go to the IMF because if our leaders go there, they will instill discipline in them. They will make sure that the fiscal deficit is lowered and so on. I'm sure you've all heard them. And I sit back and say, my goodness, what is happening? There are 32 million of us. We elect these leaders. Our constitution says that we can impeach them. And we need IMF to come and discipline them for us. Why are we abdicating our responsibility to hold our leaders accountable? Do we need IMF to put the fear of God in these leaders? Do we need the IMF? Look at what has happened in Sri Lanka, and I'm not saying that we should do what has happened in Sri Lanka. You understand? Because every country has its own dynamics and so on. So I'm not saying that we should just blindly copy what is happening elsewhere. Why? If we get to that stage and our people decide that that's the way forward, that will be the way forward. But it's not for me to come and say, let's go the Sri Lankan way and so on. Of course, the Sri Lankan uprising has had many difficulties, which we can discuss. At the end of the day, they are going to have one more person from the ruling elite to continue. That's no solution, okay? But what I'm saying is that, why? We can change the Constitution. The Constitution is in our name. So we, if we want, we can organize a referendum and change the Constitution. Everything that is done which is constitutional is done in our name. You go to court and they are prosecuting criminals. It's the republic versus the criminal. That republic is us. That republic is not the president. That republic is not the cabinet and so on. It is us. So we shouldn't wait for IMF to come and discipline our leaders. We should discipline our leaders ourselves, and we have the capacity to discipline our leaders ourselves. There are several provisions in our constitution and so on that in the meantime we can take advantage of. Rights are not enjoyed. The only way rights are enjoyed is when they are exercised. If you don't exercise your rights, you can't enjoy them. And you have a constitution which says that it guarantees the freedom of association. You have a constitution which says that it guarantees the freedom, free expression. You have a constitution which says that any citizen can organize a demonstration and so on. We can be constitutional and hold our leaders accountable. Our leaders must be held accountable, and we must develop the capacity to hold our leaders accountable. Now, the capacity to hold our leaders accountable also includes the capacity to think, the capacity to examine the problems and to find their causes, the capacity to establish whether what our leaders are telling us is the truth or is false, and so on. All of that we can do, and I think we should do it well. You understand? Now, I come from the socialist movement of Ghana. Everybody knows that. I am part of the socialist movement of Ghana. What is our primary responsibility? Our primary responsibility is to constantly engage with the population, learn from the population, especially the exploited, the downtrodden, learn from them. You understand? And I say this because many times when we meet the elite, they say we have to go and educate the people and so on. I find that most arrogant. What do you know? What do you know about how cocoa is grown and exported? Do you know that better than the illiterate cocoa farmer? We don't. It's just arrogance which pushes us to the level where we think that we are educators of the masses. We are not. Most importantly, we need to learn from the masses. Learning from the masses is so very important for our work. Learn from them. Now, when we learn from them, the skills we have acquired, some say bourgeois skills and so on, sometimes they become very relevant. Then we can, together with them, think about shaping alternatives and so on. But hey, they are the leaders of the revolution, not us. We only provide assistance and so on. So I think that we should get that straight. We should get that straight. Now, why am I a member of the Socialist Movement of Ghana? I'm a member of the Socialist Movement of Ghana because I'm dissatisfied with the way the world is today. I think we can have a better world. You know, I think we can have a better world without bombs. Bombs! What are we doing with bombs when people are hungry? I believe that we can have a better world. I believe that we can organize the educational system in this country and elsewhere in such a way the students will not have to lie on the floor to write in the sand. I believe that we can build a better world in which Ghana, which is the largest producer of gold in the world, the largest producer of gold in Africa, and the 6th largest producer of gold in the world. In a world in which gold is used to back currency, we will not have its currency tottering the way it is tottering. I believe that we can build that world. And that is why I'm a member of the Socialist Movement of Ghana. I believe in learning together with others. I believe in applying knowledge to building that new society, that new Ghanaian society, that new African society, that new world society in which no child goes to bed on an empty stomach. I believe that, and that is why I'm a member of the Socialist Movement of Ghana.
Thank you very much. I think we are behind time, but I'll quickly take some messages that have come in on our Facebook page. And this is coming from Rahman Abdul. It says, "Good evening, Uncle Pratt. Well done." This one says that this is coming from Suleiman Abdul Rahim, same from Tamale. He says that President Mahama was adapting the socialist way to develop the country, but some group orchestrated his removal with deceit. Building of the Atuabo gas plant, building of the secondary schools, building of hospitals, building of airports and markets were all examples of socialist program. Thank you very much, Abdul, for your message. This one says that yes, we know our problems, but how can socialism be the solution? If we do not know what socialism entails, I think Uncle Kwesi should have time to deal with socialism for those of us who may not have learnt about socialism, to have some knowledge as far as church at its leadership is in the 21st century is concerned. The least said about it, the better. Shalom. Thank you very much, Dennis, for your message. This one says that this is coming from Ibrahim Bangura, from watching live from Calabar Town, Freetown, Sierra Leone. It says, "Good program. I think we need to discuss the solutions now because leadership in Africa, especially West Africa, is presently problematic. Due to IMF conditionalities, Sierra Leone is on the verge to join the line because of poor leadership. Since 2018 to date, recently July 1st, 2022, 800 billion leons missing immediately after the introduction of the new leons. According to Professor Kalon, Bank Governor of Sierra Leone, mismanagement of state funds under President Bill Leader's administration." So if I'm right, once the currency was introduced, you've lost 800 billion so far, and this is coming from the governor of Sierra Leone. Okay, understood. This says that this is coming from Suleiman. It says, "Today's lecture is insightful and educative, and we expect more of these to correct the ills in Ghana." This one says that this is coming from Safas. It says, "What the black man has not yet understood is that liberal democracy is not a political system, but rather a capitalist strategy to exploit resources and take control over our masses." Thank you very much, Safas, for your message. This one says, teach, Uncle Kwesi. This comes from Al Hassan Abdul. Thank you very much. This one says, "Thank you, Uncle Kwesi Pratt. Your presentation has been touching and illuminating. God bless you." This one says, "Nice discussion." This one says, Nanado Baumia Ghana wrote. Okay, this has nothing to do with what we're discussing. This one says, "Uncle Kwesi, thank you very much." Any comments on the messages that have come in so far, briefly?
I'm delighted that this program is being watched beyond Ghana. We are getting a text message from Sierra Leone, and that should gladden our hearts. I mean, this is what we set out to do. We set out to take the message to everywhere. And if you're reaching Sierra Leone, if you're reaching Liberia, if you're reaching Nigeria and so on, I'm so very happy. Now, for those of you who are watching us from the different countries in Africa and so on, please become the messengers and take the message far and wide. Encourage your friends to watch us, to contribute and so on. You know, earlier on we were talking about Jesus the Christ. Jesus the Christ started with 12 apostles, 12 disciples. 12 disciples. 12. All of the disciples were uneducated fishermen. And in 2,000 years, they have changed the world. Now look at where we are. Look at us in Nigeria, everywhere. We can count more than 12 disciples. We can count more than 12 disciples, and they are not uneducated fishermen. We can count amongst us people with PhDs, whatever is worth. We can count amongst us lawyers, whatever is worth. We can count amongst us taxi drivers, trotro drivers, mutatu drivers, and so on. We can change the world. Let us begin that way.
Well, so ladies and gentlemen, this is where time will permit us on today's edition of Wednesday Palaver. Thank you very much to our guest, Uncle Kwesi Pratt, Secretary General to the Socialist Movement of Ghana, and of course, thank you to our studio audience for making time with us, and those of you watching us across all the 46 African countries, thank you very much. And of course, I'd like to say a big thank you to our producer and our director for making this show a possible one. My name is Ivan Barnes. Up next is Newsbreak with Justice Apia.
Trading and Farms Limited